Welcome everybody, good morning. I know for some of you it's actually good evening, and there may be some very early mornings for the few US people who have dialed in. But welcome and thanks for joining us on this session about accounts payable, P2P and intelligent automation. Trying to break through some of the hype, look at learning from both the best and worst in industry. And this is a reprise, or a reprise, depending which way you say it, of the conference session on the 15th of October at the very successful Accounts Payable Association conference. So this is a 30-minute webcast, so we're going to try and be pretty punchy as we go through this to be respectful of your time, but thanks for joining us. My name's Dan French. I'm founder and CEO at Consider Solutions. I know many of you, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Jamie Radford, who is the CEO of Accounts Payable Association.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody.
And we are both much younger and much more attractive than we look in the pictures. That's just bad lighting, apparently. So pleased to be talking to you all. And as part of the introduction, I want to ask Jamie to say a few words about the Accounts Payable Association.
Great, thanks, Dan. Well, firstly, thank you for taking the time to listen to this webinar. A little bit about the AP Association. We are predominantly a UK association representing the interests of accounts payable and procure to pay specialists. Community of around 41,000 people. We've just recently gone through our annual conference, which Dan was a guest speaker at, which was amazing. And in terms of what we do, we predominantly are a membership organisation. We have a certification programme also, which is a global programme, and we have the event schedule. And so this sort of membership, the recording you're going to go through now ultimately will be something that was at our conference, and it will talk a lot about sort of the future of the accounts payable world, the procure to pay world, and any questions you've got for myself personally, please feel free to answer us, or I'll answer at the end of the session. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jamie. And in the true spirit of end-to-end purchase to pay, it's good to know that Jamie was a former procurement director. So we're not just finance accounts payable people. We are both P's here, if that makes sense. So thanks, Jamie. Few words just about my perspective in these thoughts. So this is the way we tend to look at these kind of issues. We focus on this idea of this aspiration of world-class finance, which also includes world-class procurement. So we should call it world-class operations. But anyway, the focus of that is on the left-hand side, helping the organization drive better business results, reduce the cost of operations, better cash flow, and better risk. And we deliver that through these kind of pillars, the kind of vertical pillars there in this temple: financial control and compliance, broader risk management and assurance. And the pillar we're talking about today is very much about process optimization and transformation, all built on the platform of technology and data, without which you can't do anything these days. And the ideas I'm going to share are not just ours. We're very lucky to have some pretty large organizations influencing our thinking. And these are some of the folks we work with. You'll recognize many of those names. In fact, some of you are on this call. So that's us. That's what's influencing the discussion. Want a quick introduction from you. There's through the system, you will see a poll coming up. Just so we know broadly who's who. Are you A, in shared services or finance management? Are you a P2P, AP, or invoice to pay process owner manager? Are you an AP participant, specialist? Are you in the ERP IT world, or are you a consultant other? Hopefully you know which one you are. It's just click one, just helps frame some of the discussion. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hopefully it doesn't take you too long. Let's have a look. So by far the single biggest, the biggest group is consultants and other. Isn't that true in life? So 50% of you are consultants or others. Maybe I should have broken down what the other means. And 38% are P2P, AP, process owners and managers. And then you have a small group of ERP specialists and a small group of shared services, finance management. Well, welcome to you all. That's given us some context. And I've got one other question for you, which is, let me go back to here. The second question for you is, just in terms of context about the framework in which you work, not just add a bit of color to things. What's the primary system you use to support your AP and P2P process? So typically that's your ERP system or finance system. And this system, this webcast only allows us to give you 5 options. I know there should be 15, but we just chose 5. We had to have one called Other. So you have SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft Financials, one of the Microsoft applications, Dynamics, Navision, Exacta, or is it Other or Homegrown? And I'm expecting a similar result as we got with the consultants and others, but still, blame me if you want. So let's have, so it should be quite easy. What's your primary system? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the old scoreboard. 27%, oh, 50% of you are Other and Homegrown. That's a good prediction by me. 27% of you SAP, 14% Oracle, nobody's using PeopleSoft Financials, and 9% using Microsoft Dynamics. One day, this webcast system will allow us to have more than 5 options. Anyway, thank you for that. So we've all introduced ourselves, so that's good. So now let's get into some meat here. So this is the agenda. We've introduced ourselves. So I'm going to talk a little bit about digital transformation and the robots. And I think I've got a slightly different perspective on this, talking to organizations around the world. I think it's something really important going on, and it isn't just about technology and robotics and connecting processes. Talk a little bit about the intelligent automation opportunity, and all that includes robotics, AI, and other things. How do we learn from success and also learn from failure? And then what do we need to do to navigate the waters to be successful as a process owner or a process participant at the best of our game, and Q&A at the end. Now, what I would ask is please ask questions as you go through. There is a Q&A panel on the desktop you have, so please use that aggressively as you can, as many questions as you can. If you've got any technical problems, also use that, and one of our team will help you. And at the end, as I said, we're going to be pretty punchy on 30 minutes. We'll either answer those questions online, or we will respond to you all by email. But it's an opportunity to ask some questions and see what insight you get. So I'm going to start talking about digital transformation. Now, everyone bangs on about these amazing, web companies, Amazon, Uber, for example, and we all know what they are. And then you look at, and we think they were very different to our businesses, so they're not really very relevant. But if you look at Uber and Airbnb as an example, they're kind of interesting in that they don't own anything. All they are is dating agencies. And they make an awful lot of money out of being dating agencies. They don't have any assets. And they're massively highly valued. And you've got to believe that every board of directors is working out, how do we drive growth like these companies without the need for capital assets? So that's just a thought. And we all obviously talk about Apple a lot. Now, Netflix is an interesting one. So Netflix, so in my house, I'm the economic customer for Netflix. I pay a fee every month. I don't even know what it is. But they're not particularly interested in me as the economic customer. What they are interested in is the 5 consumers who they monitor very carefully in my house. And there is a 10-year-old child, a 16-year-old, 19-year-old, and they know intimately what all of those consumers are using Netflix for. And some of that probably be a bit concerning to look at with a 19-year-old. But anyway, what's interesting about that is a focus on the consumer, not the customer. Now, we've been all brought up to worship the customer. But Netflix have worked out, I'm not that important. What's really important is the consumers who are using the service. So I think this is important for us business-wise. I've got a couple of funny stories about Tesla, but we haven't got time, so you just have to remember that next time you see me. Starbucks is interesting because they're $20 billion of coffee based in Seattle. We all know them. You might think, what's digital about them? Because it's a retail experience, right? What's interesting about Starbucks is they now have an app where when you're on a train commuting to wherever you commute to, whether commuting into New York City or London or Birmingham, you can go on the app and say, I'm going to order an espresso and a banana. And when you get out of the train, you can go straight and you avoid the line, you pick up your stuff and move on. Now, what's great about that is their business, the fundamental business doesn't change, but whether or not you believe Starbucks coffee is the best coffee in the world or not, and because they're a client, clearly it is. But if you don't think it is, you still value convenience over outstanding, the kind of the niche product. So I know some great places for little niche coffee, but if I'm in a hurry, I want convenience. That's kind of an important thing to think about. Those of you in the UK know what Ocado is. It's a grocery, online grocery ordering and delivering service. What's interesting about that is it started off as part of a big supermarket chain, and now it's independent, public. And they are breaking down the barriers between us and our chosen brand loyalty to our supermarket we've always used throughout our lives. And what's interesting is when you order your stuff on Ocado and you can choose it to be delivered any time of the day, and if you might say, I want you to get it from this supermarket because that's the one I like, but it will say to you, do you want us just to get that product at the cheapest price? And you can see where that's going. So as a supermarket, as a retailer, that is a worrying experience because it's breaking down the brand loyalty which has been built up over decades. In the Netherlands, there's this company called Picnic, does the same thing, but they do an additional bit of consumer intimacy. We all know that certainly everybody, well, even myself, but certainly everybody under 20 buys a lot of stuff online. And if your kids are anything like mine, they'll go online, they'll buy 20 items of clothing, get them all delivered in boxes. They'll try them all on and choose the one they want and send the 19 back. But of course, they don't send the 19 back. They hope for somebody else to take the 19 boxes back. What Picnic do is they'll pick those boxes up for you and do that for you. So massive convenience. I think you're getting the point here. I'm not going into any more of this because we haven't got time, but all of these examples in things that are classical digital businesses, over Airbnb, and things that are very bricks and mortar like Starbucks. What it's making us realize is the world is changing, and the thing that's most important now is consumer convenience, and therefore we need intimacy with the consumer. How does that affect accounts payable? Well, it does. It affects all of business, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I think it's a really important to think about because in your business, in my business, in everyone's business, this conversation is happening at the top of the company about how do we drive to the soul of the new consumer. So this is, in summary, what I've been saying. All this disruption, it's a consumer awakening, the move from business to business to consumer. So if you think about one of the great brands of the world, BMW, used to be, through all my growing up and all my adult life, has been the ultimate driving machine. Now, BMW's strategy, it's on the web, is ACES, it's autonomous, I can't remember the C, but it's electric and shareable. And the point about that is that BMW are working to a world where they're now going to be not selling you high-priced assets in vehicles. They're going to be delivering a service a bit like Uber does, and you can choose whether you want the 7 Series on a Saturday night or some small thing to take you to the station, and you choose it as you need it. That has a dramatic impact to their business because you've got to realize that the dealership concept is no longer so important. They've got to have an intimate personal relationship with each of us. So I don't want to hammer that too hard, but I do want us all to realize this is going to affect all of our businesses. So this is all important stuff. And even businesses you wouldn't even believe, there's businesses which are consumer goods companies that, that make and distribute toothpaste and bleach. Even they're realizing they need to get close to the consumer. They can't rely on the classical distribution channels. That obviously affects all our processes, including P2P. So we know technology is transforming core processes, and this is the key bit that everyone thinks is about digital transformation. What I'm saying is the technology is interesting, but if your organization is not changing its business model to get closer to the consumer, you might be wasting your money. So we all know what's going on. There's lots of good stuff. We've got web-based portals, we've got integrated processes, we've got analytics, we've got RPA, all good stuff. But then think about the process. So back in the 80s, there was something called just-in-time manufacturing became really popular. And then Michael Dell really took it to a new peak with that make to order. So you'd order a Dell computer and they'd make it for you. And you'd pay before they built it. What a great idea. Now, this has really reached a whole new level. Now, this is a process that's well worth us thinking about. So just use Uber as the example, but then apply it to your own business and see which element of this might actually be relevant in the future. So in Uber, what they do is they acquire the service providers. That's the guys and girls in the cars. So they sign them up. And then once they've got those service providers in a particular area, they start acquiring customers like us. And then the actual process cycle is at the point at which you want to do something, they locate the customer through our app. They propose a service. They select the service provider. So who's actually going to be the specific car and driver. And then they commit the service provider before committing you, the customer. Now think about that. They're committing the service provider before they commit the customer. Admittedly, it's only a matter of seconds, but they commit the driver and then they commit you, the customer, or me. And at that point, they charge us. So they charge the customer at the point at which you commit to the service. So think about that from accounts payable, accounts receivable. That means they've got a DSO, a days sales outstanding of 0. Now, every executive on the planet would love to have a DSO of 0. So that is a massive change. And then the next bit is they pay the service provider. And they pay the service provider, the person that drives the car, up to 7 days after delivering a service. Now, 7 days on a 0 DSO is brilliant, because they've got the money, they've got a cash flow, right? What's interesting is the driver thinks being paid within 7 days is brilliant, because most big companies don't pay you for 30 or 60 days. So they're happy. We're happy as consumers, are now generating enormous sums of cash. Is it any surprise they've got a very high valuation? So what's interesting about this isn't a order to cash cycle. It isn't it isn't a purchase to pay cycle. It's an integrated business cycle. And I believe we're going to start seeing more and more of this. And those of us in either of those two disciplines or in the broader business management discipline have got to bear that in mind, because that is the most cash efficient way of running a business. So it's not happening today for most of us, but bear in mind, these discussions are taking place about how do we make this happen as efficiently and effectively as possible. So that, to me, is an important part of digital transformation. Before you worry about putting your robots and your AI and your systems and all that stuff, you want to think about how you're going to change the process. So what this means is the role of digital is really sort of captured by this Gartner Group triangle. We used to always talk about people, process, and technology. And what Gartner have sensibly said, actually, there's 4 components now. Data is a critical element, because in that previous process, digital isn't just about the connectivity, it's about the data. So connecting to the consumer, locating the customer, the consumer, knowledge of the consumer, committing the transaction, and doing a funds transfer, all using digital and data. So when we think about P2P and AP, and we think about that amazing Uber example, that is a classic end-to-end process. There's no gaps in there. There's no people taking data out of spreadsheets and putting them into the ERP. That's all fully integrated. Now, we know in the world of P2P and AP and any other process, we know we have a challenge with end-to-end process thinking, because we've got the procurement end, the procurement lighthouse, we've got the finance lighthouse, and the operations lighthouse. All of the people have slightly different performance measures, slightly different outcomes, and we all struggle with trying to navigate that. And this is my little image to show that kind of challenge. So we know this is a problem, and we know that integrated process cycle has cracked it. So we know what the challenges are, but we've got to bear in mind that it is going to change over time. So let's talk a little bit about technology. So when you read all of the researchers and about the importance of RPA and cloud and Internet of Things and blockchain and everything else, it's massively important, and apparently 53% of organizations think that their investment in RPA is one of the most significant things their organization is going to do. If you think about that, that's probably not the case. It's a nice survey and it's a nice picture, but I think all those things are important. They're on everyone's agenda. But in terms of strategic importance relative to the process and the outcomes we just talked about, maybe that's a little bit frothy. So let's talk about buzz and reality. RPA is a very powerful technology, without a doubt, but it is about fixing the potholes on the road, and it's not about building a whole new highway. You're not going to build that integrated business process with RPA. You might be able to glue some of the bits together with it, but that's worth thinking about. And that's Becton Dickinson, which is a great quote. I always use that. And then Genpact have also said, don't trade the entire toolbox for one screwdriver. Makes sense, right? So we're going to have a balance. And then the definition at the bottom just tells us what RPA is, which is fine. But it's important to keep a definition of what we're looking at and avoid some of the frothier marketing hype confusing us on what's really going on. So here's a slightly more balanced view about RPA projections. This is from the Hackett Group, who this data is kind of really deeply surveyed. And here's something that's slightly more close to home and more, I think, more accurate. So in terms of current, this is a this year survey, RPA used in finance. So 3% of organizations have got mainstream adoption of RPA. I think that's about fair. That's pretty much what we see. 18% are doing some. GBS, Global Business Services, obviously you'd expect that to be bigger because slightly more mature organizations. And then the focus over 2 to 3 years. Hackett say actually it's probably more like 5 years. But it's good when you're setting your discussions about business cases and what you're going to achieve, it's important to think about this because there is a lot of value to be gained and definitely RPA has a place in our overall landscape for integrating applications and activities, but also there is there's a balance here to be made. So we know what RPA is, we know what it's good for. I'm not even going to talk about this because this is obvious and we should all know this. I think the only point I would make is the bottom 2 points about making the workplace more appealing to hire into is actually a big issue, because a lot of organizations are finding that bringing in young people into the workplace, a lot of people have got higher expectations and translating data from a spreadsheet into an ERP system and actually saying, no, I don't want to do that job, thanks. So there is an important point about being able to get hold of the skills in the workplace to do these, to do what we need. So the more important thing is, what are the things that concern us? Now, everybody who's had a serious experience with implementing RPA has experienced these things, or some of them, and they will experience all of them. So massive task productivity increase is great, but task productivity increase does not necessarily scale to an end-to-end process. And I think it was Walmart, maybe the post office, said that RPA should be called robotic task automation or robotic process automation because it's more realistic. And it also sets expectations of executives better. So it's worth thinking about that. Governance, control, and oversight, really important, and it's becoming more and more important in all areas. You deploy these things, somebody's got to be managing it. The development processes needs governance, control, and process as well. And these are programmatic pieces of software. If the rules are not complete, then these will repeat errors at scale exponentially if they're not well designed. A lot of folks have been challenged with the upgrade schedule and the upgrade impact of related systems. So if you're connecting something to an ERP system, do you know when it's going to be upgraded or patched, and do you know what impacts that's going to have on your RPA bots? Rules-based automation is a powerful thing, and it's a good thing in the case of RPA, but I think it's important not to allow yourself to be confused by marketeers between RPA and AI. I'll give you an example. If you're posting revenue to the accounts, you want to be absolutely clear on the rules based on which you're doing that. You don't want some black box posting of revenue or expense to accounts without you knowing on what basis it's done, because we get audited. You've got to know the basic rules of revenue recognition. You can't just have AI learning that as it goes. So we need detailed operating instructions. This quote is a Walmart quote. If you've got a process or a task that doesn't work well, automating it is going to make bad worse faster, which I like a lot. And this point about RPA implementations, the reason 38% fail to achieve expected benefits is to do with the first point, is if you oversell the value of what you're going to do, you're probably going to disappoint. So that's RPA. Let's talk a little bit about AI, because everyone's talking about AI. There's lots of streams of it. I'm not going to get into all the detail, but the most popular, certainly, the most popular stream of AI that gets discussed is machine learning, partly because it's behind the autonomous car and it's to do with large bodies of data. So we're going to talk a little bit about machine learning, and you see these other disciplines as well. And machine learning differs from this rules-based approach we see in RPA, which, by the way, as I say, it's a good thing. You need rules-based software. Machine learning is about not defining rules. You don't need to know what good looks like or bad looks like. Machine learning is about looking at large bodies of data and identifying what is normal and what is abnormal. So what are the outliers and what is normal? Now, obviously, that has some strong benefits and some power, also has some limitations. So that's what machine learning is about. We're going to talk about a specific example here. So machine learning, trying to apply that in the real world, I think this is a good example. So if you have a cancer scare, you get a blood test and they put a speck of your blood on a slide, and a experienced pathologist has a look through a high power microscope and see if they can see any cancer cells. Obviously, highly manual task, limited to the number of skilled pathologists. So some smart person said, why don't we build a machine learning classifier, an AI classifier, which is an algorithm to learn from looking at blood cells to work out if we can diagnose cancer automatically, which is a very, very worthwhile aim. So they did this, and the machine learning AI classifier found 92.5% of the cases of cancer from blood tests, which is pretty good, right? That's software and AI and machine learning, brilliant. The downside was they realized that human pathologists could do it even better and did it in 96.5% of the time. So obviously, with something which is life and death, you want the human pathologist. So they're about to walk away from all this, thinking it was a bad idea. And then somebody observed what's actually interesting is when the AI supports the human expert, it's even better, and they hit 99.5% of success rate. Now, this is a really interesting analogy for business, because we're seeing this everywhere. The word that, or the term that's being coined is humanistic AI. The idea of augmenting human expertise and decision making with AI. In the cancer blood test experiment, it turned out that humans were better at identifying false positives, and the AI was better at finding those hard to spot cases at the edge. So, you know, that has some relevance to us in our own business processes. So to me, there's this kind of balancing act here of intelligent automation. We focus a lot on task automation, which is your ERP, it's your e-invoicing, it's your automated systems, it's your RPA, and you've also got to find a way of are we getting the right best decisions for process optimization? That's a yin and yang. And I think it's in the process optimization, that's the role of AI, and task automation is the role of RPA. I think it's worth thinking about as you think about your strategy. So remember that. How do we look across these two lighthouses, if you like, of P2P? So my co-founder is a smart AI alumni of Stanford, and he's been trying to get us to take these techniques into business processes. So if you look at this high-level process of a source-to-pay process, even bigger than purchase-to-pay, so everything from demand and sourcing through to fulfillment and settlement and paying. Now, whether you regard yourself as purchase-to-pay or invoice-to-pay, you get the idea of that picture. What we all know, however, is when you've got issues in invoicing, for example, in the settlement phase, a large percentage, a massive percentage of invoice issues are sourced much further up the process. They're in vendor master issues, they're in PO issues, they're in contract issues. So we do know that the further up the process we can shine a light, the more we can improve even the invoice to pay process. So it's worth thinking about. So this is those two lighthouses. How do we align across that? And can we look at data? So we've used machine learning to analyze tens of millions of vendors, hundreds of millions of POs and invoices across lots of organizations. Just show you some of the things I've found. So obviously we all need KPIs. So there's some automatically generated KPI performance from data out of the systems without having to calculate it in spreadsheets. Obviously it's consistent, and you can highlight what the issues are. So obviously 122 invoices per FTE per month isn't great, so there's an issue there. Invoices paid on time, you want that to be 85% or so, but that's great, but KPI results don't tell you everything. So we need some drill down insight into data. So here's some of the kind of detailed stuff we're seeing. So these are high level results based on data. So if you think you need a PR to create POs in your process, then it would be disconcerting if 23.2% of them are POs without PR. Drill into detail, find why that is. POs create on or after invoice. We all know that story. It's only 5%, but it shows process breakdown. We can look at that and identify by organization unit and material type and all the rest of it. In this day and age, I've always thought we should have cracked the duplicate invoices, duplicate payment things by now. I can't believe we haven't, but it seems to be getting worse, not any better. So obviously we need to drive into that and look at duplicate payments, duplicate invoices, identify the root causes, block the invoices, recover the payments, but drill down. What's interesting about this in machine learning, we're not just finding the obvious duplicate invoices, we're finding duplicate invoices from related entities that don't even look the same, which has been fascinating, and there's been some great successes there with some of the participants. Now here's an interesting point to do with RPA. Processing errors, that's all the invoices that get blocked and cancelled and reversed. It's only 0.5%, so it's not much. We could say, don't worry about that. But it's 10,500 invoices in a short period of time that people have got to manually go and block, cancel, reverse. That's a load of effort. And the reason for that, in this case, was the RPA bots had been put in, the rules weren't sufficiently precise, So a lot of these automated invoices were coming in and needed to be blocked because of RPA issues. That's not to say RPA is a bad thing, it's a good thing. But what this gave us the visibility on is what's the cause, what needs to be changed in the RPA box, go and fix it and save a bunch of time, which is being caused in invoice handling. Then obviously master data is a big issue. You know, we all have, I think everybody has the same problem with vendors, duplicates, data quality issue, payment terms issues. But of course that comes high up the cycle. It goes all the way back to the beginning of the P2P cycle. And that's one of the reasons why most people don't really do master data cleanup, because it's too big a problem. If you've got, let me just go back, if you've got 37,000 duplicates, nobody's got the time to do that. It's a project to do that. What's clever about this is they're identifying those vendors based on priority. So there's only 8 over those 13,000 or whatever it was, only 82 of them are here and now getting both invoices and payments on the duplicates. We want to deal with those now. 82 you can deal with very quickly. And as you can see, the priority stack as we go up. That's been a massive help for prioritizing master data cleanup, which has a big impact also on duplicate invoices and all the rest of it. And obviously drive down to the detail. And then working capital. Some of these organizations, and most organizations, have an awful lot of payment terms which they don't use and they shouldn't use. The average days paid outstanding for Fortune 500 companies this year was 57 days. Most companies don't want to be paying under 30 for sure, but there's a whole bunch of money being paid in under expected payment terms. That's a working capital impact. Great way of getting the CFO on side with making some changes. So the idea about this is looking across the end-to-end process, applying some intelligence, all of the different types of software that drives the end-to-end process, looking at the data and learning from it. So it's all about getting insight for data. There's a lot of talk about this whole process. We've been trying to do this for decades, I think, I'd say. The problem is, to do this, typically even today requires planning and requirements work, getting all the stakeholders and the process owners together, a lot of IT experts, configuration, software, all this time, false positives, iterate several times, try and find out what you're doing. You know, a lot of organizations even today are saying it's taking them 9 months to do that process. So that's not particularly, in today's real-time world, that's not particularly helpful. So what we're trying to think about is kind of Uberization. How do you make something connect and go, some process-aware analytics where we can just get nuggets of gold without all the unpleasantness. So that's kind of what we've learned out of this process. Has been quite enlightening, I'd say. So AI, RPA, do we have a driverless future? I don't think in our lifetimes, no. But you know, it's nice to think about. But there's an awful lot, awful lot of work to be done before we get there. So I would ask you to think about this idea about humanistic AI and human augmentation. And that, when you think about your RPA strategy and your emerging technology strategy, how do we do this? We do know that for every new technology, we do get this inflated expectations. Our executives get excited. They want us to change the world. The reality is, it's never quite as straightforward as that. And so this is a great Gartner Group's slide as well. Inflated expectations. We get up there, we slither down the trough of disillusionment, crawl battered and bloodied up the slope of enlightenment, and eventually get to some productivity. So the one thing I try to encourage people is to chop the top off that left-hand peak. It doesn't help anybody. It ruins business cases. It ruins the work we're trying to do. And I think if you can get straight to the slope of enlightenment with technology, that's a powerful thing. So if we want to run to become really effective digital AP, P2P GPOs, I talked about the lighthouses. We've got to look beyond those silos, both of organization and automation. And we've got to force that. So we've got to own the process, own the outcomes. A great mentor of mine said to me when I was working for a large American company, he said, Dan, it's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. And I think that's right. In terms of owning the process and owning the outcomes, everybody says, well, I don't quite own it. Just take responsibility and see what happens. Dive into data. We know data's fueling the processes, but you've got to analyze the nuances as well, as I've indicated. And we've got to embrace automation of all types, but we've got to work out where it applies best. And obviously we need to work out what skills we need to do the job. So That's me on a Monday morning. That's what I should look like on a Monday morning, but I have to lose a lot of weight first. So if you want to sort of get up and have a green tea and a couple of downward dogs, here's a few things to think about. And as we run to the end of this 33 minutes, is it working out? So process-wise, we've got to manage the detail, which we're doing well, but we also got to have the big picture. What is our big picture process-wise? Is it the classic P2P process? Are we looking for an integrated process? Where's the business going? And if we don't have that big picture, our detail will be irrelevant. This is a great experience we had from BP, which is when they were looking at their P2P and process improvement, like most people, they thought it's about, let's drive some headcount achievements, P2P efficiency. When we actually went through the whole, looked at the whole process from both ends of the P, the purchasing to the payment, realized that by far the biggest value was going to be driven for the organization through increased contract compliance and paying the right price for the right thing at the right time, rather than reducing heads in accounts payable, which again is a useful thing to think about, particularly if you're worried the heads might be close to you. So final comment I'd say is we always hope for this easy fix. We always hope for, always have this idea of, you know, quick result to things, you know, the silver bullet. Nowhere in business have I ever seen a silver bullet that works for anything. Maybe I'm cynical, but I've still not seen it. I've not seen it in technology either. So I think it's an interesting point when you're making your business cases and thinking about your journeys. It is a journey of lots of small steps. So aggregation of marginal gains, or however you want to describe it. There's no easy fix. So that's what we've talked through. I hope you've been asking lots of questions. We have overrun by 5 minutes, for which I apologise. So we will do your questions separately by email. Hope you found it a kind of a useful, quick dive into this topic. Any final comments, Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. That was a whistle tour of a very detailed subject. I think there's lots of new acronyms. Source to pay came out quite clearly, looking at the end-to-end process, but lots to think of. And I just sort of ask people to keep an eye on the AP Association. We'll be covering this sort of stuff over the next 6 to 12 months. But great, that was excellent. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I know you've got a busy day, so I'm going to let you get onto it. If you've asked any questions, we'll get back to you. If you haven't, and the service is closing imminently, you can drop me an email. And if you want to get hold of Jamie, I'll also get you his details also. Thanks very much for your time. I hope it's been useful, and enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.